Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. So today I'm going to talk about heroes once again, and more specifically about why heroes always win in the end. And the reason why I want to do this is because there is one comment that I regularly get on my videos, and it is when I cover negative things, the negativity around us today, and talk about just how pervasive it is. People keep asking, well, what do we do about it? And the simple answer to that question is the heroic. The heroic is the answer to that question. You consume, create, live the heroic. Now, I'm going to start with consume, but we'll get to the other two in a little bit. And speaking of that, if you wish to consume products about genuine heroes, created with an eye towards genuine heroism, I have 2 links in the description and the pinned comment for my 3 graphic novels, 2 superhero graphic novels, and 1 sword and sorcery low fantasy. You're looking at some of the spectacular art for those in the background. And oh, by the way, if you haven't heard, we are fulfilling the Valiant Heroes right now. And we're also working on a new story arc called Fade to Blue. It is a completely new story set in the 1930s in the Fourth Age universe. And although I keep referring to it as film noir because it is in black and white, it's that type of story, but in the style of something like Indiana Jones. It will be available, I think, through the members section of this YouTube channel. I haven't really set that up yet, so I don't know all the ins and outs of that. It might be somewhere else, but stay tuned in the next couple of weeks and I will be announcing more about that. So if any of that looks or sounds appealing to you at all, click on one of those links in the description or the pinned comment and go on over and see if one of my graphic novels is for you. But back to the topic. And as I said, my topic is heroism, but really heroism as a balm, as a cure for the progressive, quote unquote, progressive nonsense that you see around you today. So to start off from a very simple place. In my own life recently, I've been starting to consume more and more older media. This is for various reasons, and I've been doing it for some time now with older comics, just going back and reading older comics, but also I started watching older shows and older movies because I'm doing it with people who either don't remember them or people who have never seen them before. So it's very nice to see genuine, original reactions, positive reactions to these old types of media. Normally, they're usually things from the 70s and the 80s, sometimes older black and white stuff. But here's the thing. I do remember all of the 80s, but when you watch older media or really dive into older media and entertainment, especially from the 80s, you not only remember it, but you start to remember how it made you feel. And those are 2 separate things. And there is a positivity to 80s entertainment that you simply do not get today. And quite honestly, it didn't get in the 70s or the 90s either, for very different reasons. I would say for the 70s because it was a time of economic downturn. There was a dampener on a lot of things. And quite honestly, I find it funny that it took me so long to come to this realization, which I came to probably about 5 years ago, when people started talking about, oh, if the economy keeps on going the way it is, we're going to have to give up this, that, and the other thing. And I keep thinking to myself, well, who cares? That's just like when I grew up. And I didn't realize that, yeah, I grew up. My first memories were of a time of economic downturn, which was in the 70s. So all this doom and gloom people are talking about, we're going to have to give up this, that, and the other thing. I'm just thinking to myself, yeah, that kind of makes me nostalgic. I really don't care. But again, the point being is that there was a little bit of a dampener on the attitude of what was being created as entertainment in the 70s. And as for the 90s, because I have a lot of people around me who were born or grew up in the 90s and they get nostalgic for the 90s because they don't remember the 80s. The 90s, as compared to the 80s, was, of course, the time of everything being edgy. And I don't know how else to explain this, except I was thinking about it and the following came to mind. When you consumed entertainment in the 80s, you laughed along with your friends. When you consumed entertainment in the 90s, you laughed at your friends, and they laughed at you. I don't know if that's the best way to explain it or not, but that seems to me to be the way that it was. And there's a very different attitude towards people when you're laughing at someone and someone's laughing at you as compared to when you're both laughing together. So let's pull on that thread just for a second, talk about the positives and the negatives of that and how it generally affected the process of making entertainment from the 80s to the 90s to the 2000s, 2010s, and now the 2020s. And I'm going to do that as briefly as I possibly can. So the thing is that when you watch a lot of 80s entertainment or consume a lot of 80s entertainment, you'll notice that it has its own camp to it. And again, I would say that camp goes back to the idea of laughing with your friends. Why? Because everybody needs to be in on the joke. And if you're going to include everybody is in on the joke, you have to make it, to some extent, simplistic. And that simplicity does get expressed in a campy feel to your entertainment. And quite honestly, I got no problem with that. And the difference between then 80s entertainment and 90s entertainment is that for the 90s, it was much more sculpted. It was much more directed towards specific people because you, specific people, were in on the joke. Someone else wasn't in on the joke. Therefore, you laugh at them. And I think that process has continued more and more over the intervening decades until we get to today, wherein your entertainment becomes more and more selective so that it is only for the in-group. And the in-group gets to laugh at everyone else. And so we get to today where entertainment is focused on these quote-unquote progressive people, which I would say make up, at best, 25% of the population, probably about 10 to 15% of the population, if I'm really honest. And from there, they're focusing on subject matter that appeals to only really 1 to 3% of the population, focusing on all of these alphabet people stories, which might as well have a rainbow flag flying in the background of every scene for all the subtlety that it has. But again, the point being is that you have subject matter that appeals to 1 to 3% of the population that is supposed to feed the egos of about, at best, I'd say 15% of the population. Again, that's an in crowd. You're making entertainment for an in crowd so that they can laugh at everybody else. And of course, this is why, in part, entertainment is dying. If you have an industry, it needs to focus on as many people as possible for you to make as much money as possible. But again, these people are not focused on making money. They're focused on using entertainment as a political tool. And really, that's the point of where this entire thing leads to. Because what is this movement and where does it come from? It's from your quote-unquote political progressive ideology. And where does that come from? Well, it's an outcrop of postmodernism, which itself is a French reflection of the German intellectual thought within critical theory. And critical theory itself bases itself quite literally in the founding documents that were put together by the Frankfurt School as neo-Marxism. I always go back to this. It's because this is a defining moment for what we live in today. The Marxist intellectuals all got together in Frankfurt, Germany, and they said, well, look, our grand communist revolution is just not happening. We can't depend on the workers anymore. Therefore, we have to sell the idea in a different way to people. Marx was wrong on that. That's not going to happen. So what did they come up with? Well, they came up with critical theory. And what is critical theory? Critical theory is, at its most basic, a constant and relentless criticism of everything around you until it falls apart. And the slow introduction of critical theory into the university system, into the forms of government, into the systems of government, and then into our lives and then our entertainment did take a number of decades, but it is now fully ensconced in everything. And yes, it affects your entertainment because entertainment needs to be, quote unquote, political. It needs to be a political tool in order to take down this or that or the other thing, whether it be the patriarchy or Christianity or white controlling hegemony, whatever it is they want to come up with. But that's what it's for. It's a tool used for destruction. And as I have said many times before, how does this get from critical theory to our entertainment system? Well, it gets there through postmodernism. Postmodernism is the prevalent idea within our culture today, and postmodernism is just the French way of interpreting critical theory. Why? Well, because, of course, the French won't use anything German. They have to turn it into something French first. But it's the same thing. And this brings me back to the point where I started. You see, this destructive attitude is, again, a negative attitude, and it is very contrary to the positive attitude and the positive entertainment you would get in a decade like, say, the 80s. And that's why when you watch your entertainment or read your entertainment or play it today, it doesn't really have that entertainment feel to it, that relaxing feel to it, that feel-good, positive feel to it, like something that was produced in the 80s. And that's why, for the last little while, since I've been steeping myself in 80s entertainment, I feel better. I feel more positive. I feel happy. Why? Because I'm not subject to this constant negative criticism that's baked into modern entertainment. Now, of course, you will see strains of this within 80s entertainment, to be sure, but since it was so early, it's kind of ham-fisted. It sticks out like a sore thumb, and you're able to wave it away. So I'm not saying that all 80s entertainment is great and doesn't contain any of this stuff. No, it contains the germinated seeds of all of the weeds we see around us today. But it is still much more positive than anything you're going to get today. And at the same time, while you could go back to something like the 1930s and watch old movies, that would do wonders for you as well. The 80s is in close enough grasp so that it has much more of a connection to what we think and do today. And here's where I crack into the idea of heroism just a little bit. And that's the idea of, well, when I take this stuff and put it into my life, it makes me feel better. It's much more positive when I consume this kind of entertainment and I surround myself with such things. And what does that all lead back to? Well, it leads back to the idea of habit. If you make positivity within your entertainment part of the habit of your life, then you're going to be more positive. And sure, I know we live in an economic downturn time that is really negative. Again, remember that kind of stuff from the 70s. But at the very least, entertainment should be there as an escape, a release valve for all of that so that you can regain your strength, so that you can be positive. And that's part and parcel why your quote-unquote progressive people must destroy it, must make sure that there's never any positivity in any kind of entertainment that you consume. Because again, the whole point of critical theory is not just criticism that takes out the legs of the institutions around you and really just Western civilization, but it is a constant and relentless criticism of everything around you. There is no escape allowed. Why? Because the whole point is, when you draw it back to its Marxist origin, it's meant to push you as a common, ordinary citizen into the corner of, I must join the revolution. It is meant to deliberately push your back up against the wall into a corner so that you have nowhere else to go but revolt. And this is one of the, I will admit, masterful ways that progressive ideology actually works. Why? Because it depends on that same idea of human nature that has been around for so long, even though when it comes to living out progressive ideology, they deny everything, even that human nature exists. Now, what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about the fact that the ideology itself and critical theory depends upon the idea of human nature being informed to a great extent, if not the greatest extent, by habit. They know that habit-forming activities is what generates and constitutes, really, who you are to some extent. And so they must make that habit, that constant habit within your life, to be negative, to be destructive. And very briefly, what is a negative, destructive habit? Well, that's called a vice. So they want to make you vice-ridden. They want to make you a vicious individual. That's what vicious means, vice-ridden. And again, they want to make you a vice-ridden, vicious person for the double reason of, one, you got nothing else to do but revolt, and two, you're a good weapon that they can use. When you lash out viciously, they will then point you at their enemies. And I'll get back to that in a second, but I want to finish my thought on the fact that, yes, the progressive ideology does depend on this idea, the idea that human beings are informed by habit. Now, they relate to it in a different way than most of Western civilization talks about habit and how it is really part of human nature, but really, they go back to the same idea. Because, again, progressivism, when you live it out, is an idea that, quite honestly, has been sold to people as one of the biggest lies of the past, well, century at least. And one of the conduits of this big lie is the entertainment system, especially science fiction and fantasy. And what is that big lie? Well, that big lie is that you will gain fulfillment through what? Well, through newness, through jumping from one new thing to another, to another, to another. That is what will keep you excited. That is what will keep you happy. And why is it sold through science fiction and fantasy? Because it's sold through ideas like constant exploration of something new. But again, it's a constant exploration of something new that's a fantasy based upon a fantasy based upon a fantasy. Like progressivism itself, it's a lie based upon a lie based upon a lie based upon a lie. Continually, so that you never have any sure footing at all. That is how you're kept in control, because only those in control have a sure footing, because again, they go back to actual things that they deny within their ideology, which is a basis point of actual connection to the earth so that they can have power over people who are living their lives based upon ideas that are nothing but fantastical and quite literally a lie. And I call it a lie because the old way of looking at human beings and how they are constructed and how they act, whether it be spiritually or physically or mentally, isn't by jumping from new thing to new thing to new thing. No, it goes back to what? It goes back to habit. It goes back to the old thing. You continually do the old thing. And yes, I know, that does not sound like something that you want to do with your life. Trust me, I know. Within my teens and early 20s, I came to this same place where I studied these people, started studying these people that would tell you how to live a good life. And they kept on going back to habit. And I went, that's not exciting. I don't want to hear that. And at that time, I didn't. But after really, actually studying the entire thing, understanding how human beings work, and going through the mental process of the intellectual arguments and living it out through my own life, yeah, it goes back to habit. Everything goes back to habit. Mentally, even reason itself really goes back to habit. The idea of reason is, in its pure form anyways, how do you reason properly? Well, you take two or more truths that you already know, truths being something that are grounded, based in reality, and you combine them together to get a third truth that you previously did not know. So you do get to a point of newness within reason, but it is 1/3 of the entire equation, because you have to, at the very least, have 2/3 of things you previously knew and concentrate on those. Which is just another way of saying that you need to be habitually connected to those older truths that you do know, so that you can then combine them together into something new. Or if you want to put it in a more relatable form to talk about habit, let's talk about actually getting into shape. Let's talk about the physical for a minute. Everybody pretty much knows by now that if you want to get into shape, you need to exercise. And for exercise to actually have an impact, for it actually to affect your body in a positive way, what do? Well, you have to do it on a steady and constant scale, doing the same things over and over again. What does that mean? That means if you go to the gym, you got to go to the gym on a schedule. When you get to the gym, what do? Well, you do reps of one thing or another. And yes, you would consider things like running the repeated action of your foot falling on the ground. But again, that's why you have machines at the gym. Why? Because you go and do these things that are mechanical, repetitious things. This is all habit. That's the only way you're going to build endurance. That's the only way you're going to build strength. You need to make this a part of the habit of your life and do these habitual things over and over again. That's how you get fit. And just to continue the analogy just for a second, most people don't understand that it's not just building your muscles, but it's also building your endurance at the same time. Now that sounds a bit like an amorphous statement, but really your endurance, to some extent, is also strengthening the connections and the micro connections within your body of all of your systems, especially the systems that connect your muscles to the rest of you. Because quite literally, if you were miraculously just to increase your muscle mass by 5 to 10 times in 10 seconds and then try to pick up something heavy, your entire body is going to fall apart. Why? Because all of those connections and micro connections, all those stresses that need to be enhanced as well, are not there. So that's another way of saying it's not just power, it's not just strength, it's also endurance that needs to be built up with this constant habit. That is essential. And when you think about it in those terms, think about it as getting fit. And you know you got to keep on going to the gym on a schedule. You know that when you get there, you have to do the same exercises over and over again. People understand this at this point. If you understand that those are just habits, those are good habits to build yourself up, you take that formula and you apply it to the rest of your life, and the same thing needs to apply. Let's apply it, as I do every once in a while, to the mental. To the building up, not just of being smart, but the connections, the fortitude of your brain itself. The same thing works there. One of the worst things that education has done over the last 100 years is to get rid of memorization. Now, I don't mean memorization is you learn strictly through memorization, you just memorize things. No. I mean memorization as a key element of building up your brain so that you can learn things. How do you do that? Well, you memorize things. If you go back to a schoolroom 100 years ago, you get kids standing up and being told that they have to repeat the entire thing that they just memorized. And yes, that has a significant impact on the fortitude of your brain, the strength of how you can remember and how you can think. Quite honestly, what do they do to dementia patients or Alzheimer's patients? How do they get them to try and slow the degradation of their brain? Well, they get them to memorize things and repeat it to themselves over and over again, at least once a day. Why? Because doing that is like going to the gym for your brain. So if you were to do that early on in your life, instead of leaving it to the last thing when it's desperately needed, what you do is you build up the fortitude and strength of your brain, your ability to remember, your ability to understand. Because again, it's just like going to the gym for your brain. I learned this the hard way back in the 80s. Why? Because I was constantly in places where I had nothing to do or my mind was not mentally engaged on something positive. So what did I have to do since, we didn't have things like connection to the internet 24/7 and I wasn't going to tote around a Walkman everywhere and record all these things that I wanted to think about over and over again. That would just be cumbersome. How did I actually figure out a way to do this? Well, I memorized the things that I wanted to think about. Memorized great pieces of literature and would repeat them to myself, usually at least once a week, if not every day. And yes, I know I'm strange, but I would be, let's say, in the middle of a field working for, 8 hours since we're in the middle of nowhere, and I would be reciting, Plato's Laws to myself, or at the very least, one of the books of Plato's Laws, or Augustine's City of Gods, most influential passages, or Xenophon, or Aristotle, or the Psalms, something. But enough about me. Let's get back to the topic. The topic is heroes. Where am I going to come into heroes with this entire thing? Well, habit and heroes go hand in hand. And again, I can practically hear people thinking the exact same thing I used to think. Well, heroes and habits, that doesn't seem to go together. Heroes are about something exciting and fun. Habits are dull drudgery. But quite honestly, nothing could be further from the truth. And again, that is part of the entire big lie that the quote-unquote progressive system has taught you and me and everyone else in our society to think of habits and good habit-forming things as dull drudgery that's never going to give you anything positive. No, habits are going to lead to the better parts of life. Because, as I'm always going on about on my channel, what are heroes? What is the definition of a hero through our civilization for thousands of years now? Well, a hero is a paragon of virtue. And what are virtues? Well, virtues are good habits. Those virtues of a hero have been listed and numbered. A hero needs to have instilled within them justice, courage, temperance. And how do you get those instilled within you? Well, when the small things come along that say, do this in a just way, you do it over and over again in a just way. You get into the habit of being just. You get into the habit of being courageous. You get into the habit of being temperate. And of course, all of those three, as they're commonly called, horses of virtue, are steered by the charioteer of prudence. Prudence is correct decision-making based upon right reason and a habitual way of acting according to what is real. But let's bring it back down to an earthly level for just a second here again. As I said, when I was young, I kicked against this goat. I did not want to hear it. But at the same time, there was something within me which knew that it was true. There was a scene from a movie that always stuck in my mind after I watched it. I think it was probably 1993, 1994. It's a movie called The Paper. Now, I'm working off of memory, so forgive me if I get some of the details of this wrong. But there's two characters within that movie. One is Michael Keaton, and the other one is his wife, who is Marissa Tomei. Marissa Tomei is pregnant. Now, they're both, if I remember correctly, reporters. And Michael Keaton is going after some big story. And he's leaving her to fend for herself as a pregnant woman. And she stops him at one point and says, "Are you going to actually be here for me and our child?" And he says, "Of course I will." And then she gives him this scenario. She says, and again, this is just me working off memory. She says, "What happens if you're off on some scoop trying to get some story and someone breaks into our house in the middle of the night and has a gun and holds the gun to my head or the head of your child and says, 'Unless you come home, I'm going to kill your wife and your child.' But you're not there. What happens if that happens?" And he looks at her and says, That's ridiculous. That's never going to happen. And she looks back at him and she says, exactly. That's never going to happen. You can't wait for some grand gesture, for some dramatic moment to be there and then be there for that one point. No, if you're going to be there for me and your child, you need to be there for the little things. You need to be there every day. You need to be there as part and parcel of your life. And again, what is she talking about here? You need to make a commitment, and that commitment needs to be a habit within your life. And that's exactly what I'm talking about here. The commitment to habit. The commitment to going back to the things that you know that are right and doing them over and over again in the little ways, every way, whenever things come up in your life. Why? Because again, just like trying to lift that big heavy weight, if you increase your muscle mass by 5 to 10 times, your entire body is going to break down if you're not ready for it. If those connections are not there and made so that you have the stamina, so that you have the fortitude of those connections to keep everything together. If you don't have those, everything's going to fall apart, even if you try to make this monumental effort to do this thing if you're there to begin with. No, you have to build it up, like building up your muscle, like building up your endurance over and over and over again with the small things through habit. And that's the thing. You see, those habits which build up those connections, which allow you to do monumental and heroic things, those are only good habits. Those good habits, those virtues that allow you to build yourself up. Because, as I said, the people that really come up with the ideas of the other side, the quote-unquote progressive ideological side, they know about habits, and they know that bad habits, which are vices, break down those connections so that you are as weak as possible. Why? So that you can be controlled. And that brings us to the point of heroism once again. Why? Because if you want to build yourself up, if you want to be successful, if you want to actually get ahead, you need to base yourself on real things, and you need to have the endurance so that you can not just begin a thing, but you can complete it. And in order to do all that, you need to habitually do what is going to build up your endurance. And those habitual things, those habits, need to be in a good form. Only good habits will allow you to do that. And what are good habits? Well, good habits are virtues. And if you're going to build yourself up in virtue, and the heroic is a paragon of virtue, guess what you're going to do when you seek to do that? You're going to enter into the realm of the heroic. And this is why heroes always win in the end. Why? Because they base themselves on things that are real. They act in accord with reality. But you might say, what about the tragic hero? Well, at the same time, a tragic hero is still a hero that wins. Sure, they're a hero that will have to sacrifice a whole lot, sometimes even their lives, to win, but they still win. And one of those bare, basic truths that have been run through our civilization, going back to, at the very least, Plato in the 4th century BC, is the idea that if you want to actually be a good person, actually get to be something within this life, you have to value what is true above what is yours. And that includes your life. So no, a tragic hero doesn't lose in the end. A tragic hero is being devoted to the truth so much that they will indeed sacrifice their life for the truth because they know the truth is greater than their life. And that's not really a sacrifice because in order to get to that point, they need to have lived a good life. And that's really the point of where I started with this entire thing. And the point of how you use heroism as a balm, as a cure to this quote-unquote progressive nonsense around you. Because, as I said, the quote-unquote progressive ideology seeks to put you into a negative place where you have nothing, where you constantly lose, and everything around you is destruction. Even what you give to others is nothing but destruction. That's what critical theory is based upon. That's what they want. That's what they sell. And you counter that by being positive. You counter that by surrounding yourself with things and habits that are going to uplift you rather than bring you down. And honestly, when I say these things and read some of the comments on my videos, I kind of feel like, what's that story from the Bible? The servant of Naaman. Naaman was a great general who developed leprosy and he wanted to get rid of it. And if I remember correctly, he sent through the king a message to the king of Jerusalem. I'm not entirely sure. I can't remember that part. What do I do in order to get rid of this leprosy? And he was told, bathe yourself 7 times in the Jordan River. And he got very upset because he said, I'm not going to do that. That's a ridiculous thing to ask of me. It's a small little thing. It's not going to help. And his servant went, listen, if they asked you to do something spectacular and hard, you'd do it. But they're asking you to do something very small and easy. Wouldn't you think, in order to get rid of this disease that you have, you would do this small and easy thing? And then he went and did the small and easy thing, and he was cured of his leprosy. I feel like that servant of Naaman. Why? Because I keep on saying, all you need to do to get rid of this progressive nonsense in your life is develop good habits, develop virtues. It's a very simple and humble thing to do. And people wave it away with the back of their hand. Oh, that's not exciting. Oh, that's not new. Therefore, it's never going to lead to anything. That's the progressive nonsense being stuck in your head talking. These simple, humble, habitual things, these so-called quaint ideas like virtue, are what bring you to a good end. And that's really the driving point behind this entire thing. I don't know if you've seen it, but over the last, I think it was a month ago, there was an article that came out talking about how your quote-unquote progressive people were the people who were the most unhappy. And a lot of us on the conservative side of the spectrum went, well, duh. Obviously, these people steep themselves in nothing but death and destruction. Obviously, they're going to be unhappy. That's the point. You see, they surround themselves with the destruction of their ideology. It makes them miserable. But if you surround yourself with the positivity of virtue and of creation, well, you're going to be happy. And that's how you distinguish, first of all, whether or not you're distinct from these quote-unquote progressive individuals, and whether or not you're actually moving in the prudent direction with your own life. Why? How? Well, it's whether or not things are working out for you in your life. And I've experienced this in my own life constantly. I have people that are really good friends of mine, and they get extremely upset with me over and over again. Why? Because I don't follow societal norms, societal rules that I know are just made up rules, and especially rules that are made up on your quote-unquote progressive nonsense. I don't follow those. And they look at me and they say, how in the world does everything work out for you? You don't follow the rules. Why do you actually get to be successful? And they get very upset. But they won't listen to the answer. The answer being, well, I don't follow those made-up rules. I follow the rules based on reality. I follow virtue. I seek the truth. And I wish to make myself a servant of it. I try to be heroic, even though people around me and society is looking down at me going, you can't do that. Quite honestly, I've got people looking at me throughout my life doing that, saying, well, you can't do that. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, I can. That's based upon the truth. I'm doing that. Sure, it's going to be hard, but I'm doing that. Why? Because it's going to lead to a good end. Because that's the point of actual philosophy. That's the point of virtue. That's the point of heroism. And that's the point your quote-unquote progressives will never get to. The point of why and how you should do and live according to all of this archaic ways of thinking, these simple and seemingly boring ways of acting according to habit. What's the point in all of that? Well, the point in all of that is that it leads to the good life. So, if I've given you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right-hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about all this. And don't forget, there are 2 links in the description and the pinned comment for my 3 graphic novels, stories that are based upon the ideas of true heroism with spectacular art. So if any of that looks or sounds appealing to you at all, click on one of those links in the description and go on over and get yourself a copy of one of my graphic novels today. All right, I'll leave it there. I'll see you later. Bye.